Danny the Door. This is the Outside Gate with Steve Hall on the L4 Media Network, where we talk US moto and anywhere the conversation goes. Joining me today, it's my pleasure to have the 1979 500cc national champion and 1982 250cc world champion, as well as AMA Hall of Famer, three-time Baja 1000 winner, and Motocross of Nations winner, Danny Laporte. How are you?
Good, great. Thanks, Steve. It's nice, great to be here. It's gonna be fun.
No worries, thank you, man. I was just telling Danny, just
Yeah,
stoked to talk to another legend that I used to read about in magazines. So similar to what I would have said to Sir Donnie Hanson just a few weeks ago. There, it's really really cool. I've been I'm a historian, I guess. I've been a huge fan of the sport for a long time, and getting a chance with this modern technology to talk to people on the other side of the world. Danny,
yeah,
you're in Oslo at the moment.
yeah. Right. Yeah, right now it's just looking outside at the all the greenery. You can't see it from here, but yeah, it's pretty nice. Anyway, it's green, so
Yeah,
you
yeah.
can't see it.
Oh
But
no, yeah. Oh yeah, there we go. Yeah, the
yeah,
sun's a bit too bright in the window to show it there, but yeah.
I don't know
Yeah.
how my son picked a place to live in Oslo, but he likes it here, and he has a little boy. So every year we come up here to hang out with him for a few weeks.
Well, there you go. That's why I was about to ask. I knew that we'd been texting and that about when to do the show, and
Yeah,
you've been in France, and now you're in Norway and that sort of thing. And I was going to ask, like, how's the holiday? What have you been up to? So
yeah.
obviously your son's there.
Yeah. Well, I have a daughter. She's married to a soccer player actually, and he plays for DC United, and so they're based in Washington, actually in Virginia right now. So she's on that side. She has a little girl, and a little. So I have a granddaughter, and then my son has a little boy, Marley, and they live here in Oslo. So yeah, we have to kind of to see everybody. We have to kind of travel quite a bit, and it's kind of a bummer. But um, I mean, I raised my kids dragging them around the world, so I guess I get what that's kind of the way our life is. I think my son was living in Europe when I was racing the rallies when he was just, and my daughter as well. So they kind of grew up in France, and then once we went back to America, their lives were just kind of a little bit scattered everywhere.
Mm.
So they're kind of worldly people, and it's kind of good. It's good.
Yeah, it is. It's cool, really. I'm
Yeah.
sure the distance from your grandchild in Norway would be a bit difficult, but yeah.
Yeah, yeah, that's all. And they come visit us in California every summer for well, not every summer, a little bit in the winter, a little bit in the summer. So we make it work. It's okay.
I suppose the flights aren't too bad, I guess, from Europe to the States. The flights aren't too bad, I guess, are they really? Like,
Yeah, it's 12 hours. So, it's a lot
mm.
better than flying to Australia for sure.
Yeah, yeah,
From I'm glad they do in
Australia,
Europe
yeah.
and in Australia.
Yeah,
But
Australia won't get anywhere in 12 hours,
yeah, exactly. Somewhere
except
in
for
the
maybe like Thailand or somewhere. Like, you won't get anywhere else in 12
yeah,
hours. Yeah,
that's right.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, that's for
So no,
sure.
it's
Yeah.
all good. I enjoy it. My son's he works in the tennis thing. My daughter also works in the tennis community. She works for the WTA out of London, and and my son's coaching a tennis program here in Norway. So
Okay. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. So how did the kids get into tennis then? Is that from their
yeah,
mum
because
or?
because I was still racing and traveling, and it's hard to and I honestly didn't really. I wanted them to try something else besides, well, my son for sure, besides racing a motorcycle. And I always thought it was kind of a uh, I mean, I'm not saying weird or lifestyle or job, but I'm amazed that I ended up racing a motorcycle. You always sit on a plane and people sit down to someone or somewhere and they'll say, well, what do you do? And I say, I race motorcycles. And the look on their face is pretty funny. I'm sure everyone will agree about that. Well, you race motorcycles. Can you make a living at that? And isn't it dangerous? So, you get all kinds of funny things. So I always thought that, it'd be good to, instead of going down the motorcycle path for my son, to get him into something else. I couldn't be there all the time because I was still traveling and working,
Mm.
and when you're a son, you want to, if he's going to race a bike, you want to kind of be there in the beginning, so my wife started taking him we started taking him to tennis, getting lessons. And then, so that kind of led to, their path in their life. And then, it's also a good thing too, because they both got scholarships to great universities. And, so there's also good things about what tennis can bring to your life. So that's kind of what I always thought, it's something a little different than what being a dirt bike racer.
Yeah. Oh, very good. Very good. What's your thoughts on, just before we obviously we're going to want to dig into your life and your career, but what's your thoughts on the AMA Nationals lately, or the GPs? Have you been on your travels? Have you been keeping up with what's going on there?
Yeah, no, I keep up. I love watching. I try to watch as much Supercross as I can, motocross and Supercross. I like the outdoor nationals, obviously. It's going on right now. Um, and just to me, watching it, the level of the riders is really amazing now. They get better and better all the time. The technique gets better, their style. And the Lawrence brothers have kind of right now have kind of dominating a little bit in a way, which is, interesting. And seeing new talent like that is really fun for me. And, as an American, kind of, I like that Europeans and international guys are come over and racing in our series now. So, but the two brothers are phenomenal. The Aussies there. So kudos to you guys for that. But yeah, I just, it's good because, really becoming an international. I think the nationals are kind of becoming the
Mm.
world championships now a little bit. In the sense, when I was racing, it was the other way around. Obviously, if you want to race the world championships, you had to go to Europe. But now you can just stay in America, and they're all coming over. So
They are,
it's
yeah.
really, yeah, it's becoming, and I love that. I think I like to see just everybody together, in the world racing. Having two championships, one in Europe, one in America. It's always kind of a, a it kind of misses something. I think I'd love to be able to see a one world championship, whether it be in the US or Europe. It'd be fantastic. But, yeah, the competition is great to see. And, but yeah, definitely Jet Lawrence it kind of reminds me of when Jean-Michel Bayle came to America, back
Mm.
in the early 90s. And he was, he came over, kind of, he was kind of unknown. And then boom, all of a sudden he's winning, and everyone's eyes are all, wow, it's incredible, how can he do this, so, but he had that extra talent, that's something different. And I wish
Mm.
the same, his lines were different, he was really creative. He approached the race so much different than the other Americans, which, I think made him do what he did, the championships that he won. And, and his style and technique. And I think the same thing, the Lawrence brothers now have brought another level of
Mm.
that type of, something different, and that's what I really love to see. And that can't always happen when everyone's racing in the same country. Everyone tends to take the same lines, to do the same whatever.
Yes.
It's just basic simple thing I'm saying, but it's
Yeah.
kind of everyone kind of. But when you bring in someone from the outside, it's really great to see something different, something new.
Mm.
And, that's what's exciting about American motocross now. And I think it'd be really empty if you didn't have the international riders that you do. If it was just an American championship, it wouldn't be as interesting.
Mm. Yeah, well, you look at it at the moment, you got like Tom Vial,
Right.
um, Tom Vial, yeah, and the Lawrences, and you got Joe Shimoda. Joe's off the pace a little bit at the moment, but
Yeah.
we know
Yeah.
he's capable, and yeah, and
Yeah.
then we've got Prado,
Yeah. Exactly.
coming over,
Yeah.
Spain. That's something different again, to have a Spanish rider. So
Yeah. They're
yeah.
all, they're all looking at America, because that's the play. They want to go to America now
Mm.
to have an American title. And, I think, it's before, it wasn't like that so much. You had riders come over, Jean Michel, and then there was Pichon, and then, you had occasional guys coming over,
Mm.
David Villeman over
Mm.
the last 20 years, but, No, it's exciting.
It is. It is. Yeah.
Yeah.
It certainly a topic that you know as better than anybody has been a pioneer of the other going the other way, being
Yeah,
an American,
exactly. Because
heading over there. Yeah.
at that time, I thought that's the place you had to go. Always, I thought that's the place you had to go as an American to really do something different, rather than just racing the nationals. And at the time, no one had won a world title. Brad had been over there for 7 or 8 years before
Mm,
I had gone, and still no one had won a title yet.
mm,
So it was really still a goal, I think for an American to win a title. And I always had that in my mind. Even actually, when I first went, I signed a contract with Suzuki. Maybe just after a year, I was already starting to plant seeds at the management at Suzuki that hey, if there's ever an opportunity, I'd love to be able to go race in Europe if there's a place at Suzuki for me over there. So right
mm,
away, I was already, even before I won a championship, I was thinking to go to Europe to race to win a championship. So
mm.
that's just the way I always thought. And I think I only raced in America for 6 years before I went to Europe. So I didn't, I was only 6 years in America before 82. Yeah. So 80, 76, 77, 78, 79, 80, 81. Yeah, 6 years before I went to
Mm.
Europe. So that's not a long time in the States compared to
Yeah.
some of the years the guys race now.
Mm.
So yeah, I just thought that it was always that was kind of my goal, always to try to win a national championship and then go race a world championship, and that's kind of what I wanted to do. Yeah,
Awesome. All right,
yeah,
let's dig in. My favorite question then in all the shows is I love to hear about when you first got the bug first bit for motorcycles, when you first rode a mini bike or you saw a mini
yeah,
bike, or when did that flame
yeah,
just start flickering? Yeah.
yeah. I had a uh, I lived in Los Angeles, so even back in the 70s or late 60s when I first started riding, you had to go to the desert. You had to get out of town to ride. There were lots, vacant lots in my neighborhood that you could go ride. And for me, it started. It's called a Bonanza mini bike. And so actually, okay, I got back up because the first time I ever saw a motorcycle, my dad he was electrical contractor. He had a pickup truck, and he drove into our yard, and he had a it was a Montesa, I think, called a Montesa. I can't remember. It was an enduro model Montesa, and
Like
I
a
saw this dirt bike.
king
It was what?
scorpion, or a king scorpion, or
Yeah, something like that.
something
Yeah,
like
it
that.
was.
Yeah, they had some
Yeah, maybe a
cool
scorpion,
names
and
like that. Yeah, yeah,
yeah, they had all the great names,
yeah,
Libido and and
yeah,
Persang, and
yeah.
yeah, all the Bultaco, all the Spanish had the cool
The
names
Spanish
back
had
then
the
as
cool
well.
names of their bikes. Yeah.
Yeah, they did. Really, it's amazing. So he pulls up, and it's that got it's kind of like more like a scrambler type, not a pure motocross bike at the time. I said, "Wow, that is awesome!" I saw the thing in the back of the truck, and from that moment, it was like I was mesmerized. As what is that thing? Because never really I never had really seen a dirt bike until that day. And so not long, my dad started riding a little bit, and then he got me a mini bike, and it was called a Bonanza, and it was a Briggs and Stratton, or no, what kind of engine? I can't remember. Tecumseh string pull. You pull like a lawnmower motor
Yeah.
in a mini bike. And so I started riding in the yard and doing laps in the garden, and laps going left, going right, but I just do circles all day. And then finally, he took me to the desert. Him and his friends, they all went out and camping, and we'd go hang out, and they'd have a bonfire. And the next morning, we get up and go ride. And so when you're that young and you get on a mini bike or anything that could, at that time, that was really all that was available. There
Mm.
wasn't a 50cc bikes or anything. So you're in the desert and you take off, and it's like nobody can tell you no or this, or when you're a little guy, you're always usually being bombarded by people. Don't do this, don't do that. But on a
Yeah.
mini bike in the desert, you take off and it's like freedom.
Yeah.
And I'll never forget that. When I got on the mini bike, I just turned the gas and took off, and I kept going and going and going. And then I remember stopping and figuring out how to come back to where I started from. Right. So it was just a great feeling, that I got my very first experience riding in the desert and like that. And then we'd go every few weeks, we'd go out to the desert. And then finally I was big enough. Then he bought a Hodaka for my sister, because I was still too small. She was a year and a half older than I was. And so she was riding. And then she got tired of it. She stopped after a short time. And then I kind of got the hand-me-down Hodaka. And now I had to get, stands. I wasn't big enough to get on the Hodaka 100.
Yeah. Super rat.
And so, yeah, because I was just a little. So finally, everything was, it was like from a mini to a motorcycle, pretty much back then. Yeah. Although Hodakas now, you look at them, they're small, but still, when you're 9 years old, it's still a big bike, 10. And then, so yeah, that was in 68 was the very first time I rode a motorcycle. So I was 11 years old, not that young compared to today, but then it started. After that, I got always the hand-me-down bikes. It was the Hodaka, and then I had a Penton 125. Oh no, I mean a Penton, a Sachs 125, I believe. Yeah, it was the Penton Sachs 125. And then, so it was always bikes that my dad had raced before. He rode them well. Then he gave them to me. Then he bought a Mako. He had a Mako, and then I had the Penton. And which Pentons, I think people in Australia know or anywhere in the world, it's a KTM.
No, the KTM,
And in America, it was marketed through the Penton family. John Penton was the originator of that brand.
Yeah.
And so anyway, that was the first experience and then after that bike, I started doing little local. One of the first races I did was in Los Angeles near the oil refinery, and we called it the slough. And it was this, where all the it was like a dirty old dump area where all the oil companies back then were dumping junk and trash, and there was just it was just a mess. But there was a little track around there, and there was a race, believe it or not, there, and I rode the Penton there in my first race. So that was pretty exciting.
There'd be no dust. There'd be no dust there. There'd be no dust on that track where they're dumping all the
no, it was good.
Oil drums.
Yeah, no, I know. It's pretty funny, so and actually it's really funny, the story. That little place we call Five Corners in LA, 30 years later, there was a little piece of dirt still there. I showed Jean-Michel Bale where to go practice, because I lived in the area, because he lived in LA, and he'd go right to that little corner, and he built a track in the same place in 1990. You can imagine, or whatever, about 1990. So it's kind of a cool story. But so the vacant lots, I learned riding on vacant lots in LA. We start from my garage, go out of the house, down the street, over the neighbors' yards, through the grass, down the street. The police would chase you. You get in the dirt. And so it was real free and really, a lot of fun and easy time to learn how to ride a bike back then, because you could ride anywhere, really.
Yeah. It's amazing. I had the last show there, a couple of shows back, was with Mike Webb, and he was telling me about they had a vacant lot straight across the street where him and Tom and their little brother learnt to ride and that sort of thing. It was it was a pretty awesome time to be growing up in California at that time, I'd say.
Yeah, it was, and I think that's it really became in America. At first, all the top back in the 70s, early 70s, late 60s, most of the riders kind of came from back east, Tony DiStefano, or, they were kind of spread out all over the country. Steve Stackable, Jimmy Weinert was from New York. So all the guys in the 70s, 60s and 70s were out of the East mostly. But then in California, because of the weather, and it had caught on by the early 70s, so many young guys were riding. And I think guys like Glover, myself, Hannah, Marty Smith were a result of that because we grew up just after those guys, and we were racing from my house by 1972 from Los Angeles. I could ride Saddleback, Indian Dunes, Carlsbad, and Irwindale. There was a bunch of tracks. That's just a few, but I'd ride. I'd come home from school on Wednesday and my mom would have food made ready, and I had the bike loaded in the back of the van. And after school, I'd go to Ascot and race at Ascot Park, motocross during the week on Wednesday. I go Friday to Indian Dunes after school. I jump in the van. I was then able to drive by that time, or even before that. If I was 15, my parents would drive me. Race at Indian Dunes on Friday. And then on Sunday, I'd go to Carlsbad. So I was 15, 16, racing 3 days a week during school. You think about that. It's really, and that's really true. I mean, you could ride 3-4 days a week in California, race, and the bikes would stay loaded in the van until the tires were just completely bald. So you have to take them out, and then once every few weeks you'd work on the bikes, and or more than that, but it just depended what races. But we could race literally 3-4 days a week, easy in California, and the weather was always good. We could race at night at Irwindale, at Lions Drag Strip, Ascot at night, Indian Dunes even at night, and then so it was really an exciting time.
Yeah, although I used to read a lot about it, and it's an amazing time. Like I used to watch on any Sunday on repeat, and see that sort of what was going on in California and that sort of thing, and it was an amazing time.
Yeah. Same with the guys. Actually, I was from LA, but same with the guys down in San Diego area. Marty Smith and Tommy Croft, and those guys were riding. Marty Stripes, Marty Smith. Those guys were all riding down south, and they were Marty Modes. All those guys, they had tracks down south as well. So California was on fire in the early 70s, and then by the time 76 came around is when literally all the California guys kind of hit the nationals.
Yeah. Tell us about that then. So that's when you did, and do you remember your first race, even before the nationals, just your first race?
Yeah, my first race was at the place called the Slough.
Okay, it was there, yeah.
Yeah, and it was like 1968, and then my next big race was at Carlsbad. After that, I rode a Hodaka in 1969. That was, I guess, an official track. That little place, the Slough, was kind of was just a fun event, not really a super motocross. But the first real motocross track was at Carlsbad.
Yeah.
And riding my Hodaka with lineman's boots and football, a helmet. I can't remember what kind of helmet, with a football, American football mask screwed to the thing. Pretty cool.
Yeah, it is cool. It is cool. Yeah.
Yeah.
The old gear. Like I collect a lot of old photos and that sort of thing. I love the real old photos where you see things like that. Like kids with football shoulder pads on, and like football jerseys, and
Hey, it's still evolving,
Riggers
right?
clubs. Yeah.
The gear's getting still evolving, right? We never found the perfect system yet,
Yeah, that's right. Well, they'll never get it right though, because you want to be comfortable, but you want to be protected as well, and that just doesn't work, does it?
Oh yeah, totally.
You're sacrificing one or the other with gear. You want to be comfortable or well protected. So
exactly. I mean, when we went to full face, I didn't even like that because it seemed like you couldn't breathe and you couldn't see. And then then the next big thing was the JT V2000 full body protection system, whatever they marketed it as. But it was a great idea. But you couldn't tilt your head. It was kind of like you were stuck. Like a
Yeah.
little bit like having the neck braces that guys wore for a while.
Yeah.
And I think it limited your movement, which made it seem to be more dangerous because the balance wasn't there.
Yeah. Because you
You
can't
know,
ride
anything
as
that
good.
hinders
So
your
yeah.
balance and your body motion can really, you got to be free feeling, you
Mm.
know? Yeah. So,
Yeah. It's a trade off. I think some things
yeah,
though, like I think that like boots and helmets. I think that's probably the two things that have come a long way. Like
true.
boots are amazing now compared to
Yeah.
what
That's
they were. Like when I started wearing boots, it would have been similar to what you had
yeah.
worn because they didn't change for a while there. So just leather with lots of buckles and a steel toe cap thing, and that's about it.
Yeah.
um,
Well, the proof of that is like when I was racing, even in the 80s, I'd go through a pair of boots, I think every race, because even Alpine Star or at the time they were, yeah, Alpine Star boots I was wearing, um, because they were just leather, and the leather, gave you support for a while, but then was like wearing a sock after a while in
yeah,
the ankle area, and then um, the, so they would only last a few events, a few races. But now a pair of boots will last, if you take care of them and you're just in, race, I don't know if you're an average guy that races 10, 15, 20 times a year, they'll last 2, 3 years, a pair of boots. I've got boots that have now, 100 hours on them, I think.
yeah,
Trail riding I
yeah.
trail ride in the mountains out of LA, and the soles will wear out, but the protection is still there.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, you'll wear the soles out
Yeah.
first, won't you? Especially
Yeah.
like, if you keep your foot pegs sharp and that sort of thing. Like I used to let my
Yeah.
foot pegs wear out so my boots lasted longer.
Yeah.
But
You didn't
then
you didn't you didn't sharpen them, you filed up them off, right?
yeah, I used to, but
I know.
nowadays I keep them sharp again because it is
Yeah.
it is safer anyway, isn't it? So
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
that's for sure. Danny, so tell us about getting that gig with Suzuki and yeah, get going
Yeah.
start of your pro career.
Yeah. Well, I was going to obviously I was, I think, 17 at the time, or 18. I was 18, I think, and still in high school about that age. Yeah, I was 18, 17 and a half or 18. And I was getting ready to go do a local race. I was in the garage working on my bike, working on it. I don't know what I was doing. I think I had I'd ride it. I'd practice on a 125 Elsinore, and then I would race somebody else's bike on a weekend. It was these Franks bikes. And there was actually Kelvin Franks was an Aussie, and he was partners with Stu Peters in CMC. I don't know if you knew that.
Okay, no, I didn't know that. No.
And he built a bike. It's called the Franks, and he was really so at that time he took 250 Suzuki RM motors and TM or RM at the time, and then
Yeah.
he took 125 Elsinore motors and put them in his own chassis that he built. It was a nickel
Okay.
plated chassis. He had longer travel than anybody out there. He built an up pipe. The forks he got from Europe were big, oversized, bigger than anything Honda or Elsinore had at the time.
Mm.
And it was the bike it was rigid. It was stronger, so you could hit bumps and stuff a lot faster than you could, like even on Elsinore. And he built this bike in his garage. He had a little shop, and he had frame jigs, and he built this custom bikes. I mean, unbelievable.
Mm.
And you should check it out, called the
Yeah.
Franks motorcycle.
Oh yeah.
And
I have a mate. I have a mate who he will know about him. So yeah,
yeah,
I'm
I
gonna
mean,
ask him about it. Yeah.
the thing it was a monoshock, and he had all these really cool systems, how to adjust the chain. He had, on a cam system. I mean,
Mm.
the guy was genius, I thought, and the bikes were but so anyway, I think I was about ready to give up racing. And this is the story how my career path started, actually. So I was about ready to give up. I was at the point, well, I got to go to school, or work or go to work. I had no choice. My dad told me, he goes, you're gonna be 18 pretty soon. You have a choice. You're either gonna go to college, I'll help you go to college, or you'll go to work. And if you don't do those two things, you got to move out, right?
Yeah.
One of those things, kind of basically,
Yeah.
and so I started thinking about it. I go, shit, this might be my last chance. So I had quit riding. I went up to watch Snake River when Evil Knievel tried to rocket himself across the Snake River. They had a race, and at that time it was the biggest purse event even in America at the time. I think it was like $100,000 purse even back then. You imagine,
Mm.
and bigger than anything if we have today.
Yeah.
And so Marty Smith ends up winning the 125 class, and I think he made like $10,000 for the class win. And I go, you can imagine in 76, 75, that was 75. And I go, beginning of 74, 75. Anyway, I just go, holy shit, what was I thinking? I got to get my ass in gear. I could have been there because I knew how I raced Marty local, and then I knew that he had gotten his factory Honda deal and he went to Europe, and so I was kind of following, and that really got me motivated. So I went back and I got a Honda 125 Elsinore, started going local races, Saddleback and Indian Dunes, and Carlsbad, and I was winning and whatever I could do, and probably blowing up or breaking parts and like you do it back then.
Yeah.
But Kelvin had seen me and he offered me a deal, Kelvin Franks, to race his bike. And I shoot, why not? He's going to deliver bikes to the track, 250 and a 125. And I just got to show up and race. I said, that's awesome. It's the first. And then I started everything I was doing. I did really well on the bikes. I was winning a lot. And even on the 250 and 125, and I would ride them until the rods went out the bottom of the cases or whatever. Bikes broke back then. They were fast bikes. He had them built to the tilt. And, so anyway, I raced that season for him, and Suzuki had noticed my performance, and I was in the garage getting ready to go to a race, working on a practice bike, and Suzuki calls the house, and a Japanese man, Toshi Koyama, and he said, hey, Danny, would you be interested to come down to Suzuki? We'd like to make an offer for you about racing the nationals next year. And so I said, Tosh, let me call you back. So I called my dad. I talked to my mom. I know I was at home. So I talked with them and I said, what do you think? And they said, well, you've only got one opportunity to in your life. So do what you want to do, So I was such a good timing, right? Because it was at the point whether I had to go to school or do something or go to work. And so I ran down to Suzuki and I signed my first contract that week, literally. And Suzuki had hired myself. They hired actually Hannah was racing for them as well. And but they had ended up hiring myself and Ron Turner and I think Jeff Jennings. And then Yamaha hired Glover and Hannah. So, and Billy Grossi rode also the 125 at the time. So it was myself. I think Billy Grossi, myself were the main two guys, and that for the 76 season. And but they hired Ron Turner as well, another local California guy. So their idea was now Yamaha and Suzuki wanted to go after Honda because Marty Smith had won the title.
Yeah.
Like 2 years and he was out there alone, right? Suzuki wasn't really there, and Yamaha. So the times that we need to put teams together, and they did. And so we went out, and the goal was kind of to try to beat Marty. So the very first season in 76 at Hangtown, my first race in the Nationals, I was so stoked, I was on the full factories, RA, Suzuki. It was such cool bikes. I had the right bike. And at Hangtown, my fork snapped off the first national. And I was wide open, fourth, fifth gear down the straightaway. It was a little jump. Luckily, it didn't come off the big. There's this big drop away, flat landed track at the old Plymouth track, and which is a sand, kind of a sand track. It was really, really neat track, completely different than the new Hangtown. And luckily, my forks didn't snap off there. They snapped off on the other part of the track.
Yeah.
And my dad had been standing there in the crowd of people, and he literally saw I was KO'd, and he leaped over the track, and and to kind of help me, he was the first guy to find me, and KO'd, laying there with my face in the ground, and so that was my first day. But at the end of the year, Hannah had won, and I had tied Marty on points. And I think I finished, or he beat me, but I think I finished third, and Marty finished second. So, it was pretty close.
Yeah.
And it's kind of an exciting season. And I ended up winning a couple events that year. And the forks on the Suzukis were the triple. So what happened were they went from like 9 inches of travel, I think it was about 8.5 or not, about 9.5 inches of travel to 11 inches of travel. And both top and bottom triple clamps, if you can imagine, were hollow sand casted magnesium. I mean, it's like a cookie. It's like a chocolate chip cookie, just crumb, because the longer suspension, those clamps weren't calculated for that longer travel. And so it's kind of it happened. DeCoster broke some forks off. I broke another set of forks off, actually, until they figured out they had to go back to solid aluminum.
Yeah.
Machine.
That 76 Suzuki was a bit of it was the start of long travel, really, wasn't it?
It really kind of was.
Yeah. It was, I love those bikes. So that's 76. Those B model Suzukis is one of my favorite bikes ever. I reckon they're super cool. The last of the aluminium.
The bike was so light. I think it was like 176 pounds or some ridiculous. Like everything was super tight. It was titanium, magnesium, everything. Like I said, the triple clamps were feather light, which actually there's a lot to say about super light. The bikes were so easy to ride with 2-stroke in sand when they're light. You can just throw the bikes around so easily. And as the bikes went on, they got with radiators and brakes and disc brakes, and the things got so heavy, now, so there were different bikes to race, I think, completely.
Yeah. I wrote down here your first win was it was at a track called Motocross West in 76. Your first national win. What track was Motocross West?
I'm trying to think. I think I won. I think I won in Louisiana. Was that Louisiana?
Not sure.
Or I can't remember what track that was. Actually, I don't even remember. Don't even recall what that track was. Yeah. I think I won a few nationals that year, but I don't really remember which track that was. I think I don't know if I won in San Antonio. Maybe it was San Antonio.
Yeah. San Antonio, that's West Texas, isn't it? So that might be.
It might be considered West Texas.
That might be where the Motocross West name comes from. Anyway, I'll track it down. I'll figure it out anyway. Yeah.
I guess I don't remember the very first race that I won, but but that was a fun time. I mean, so that was my first season, and
a little bit of Supercross in 76 as well.
Yeah, I rode Supercross, and then I think I was probably at that time. In fact, my whole time racing motocross, I never really got into the Supercross thing. In my mind, it was still just motocross, right? Supercross is still kind of relatively new.
Yeah.
And the tracks, they were building the tracks really.
Yeah.
They were like, the jumps were like, if you pull up to a jump, the jump was flat. And then all of a sudden there was an angle. There was no ramp.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
then the jump was a straight up angle. And then when you're in the air, if you're doing a double, then you're looking at the next one that looks like a wall because it didn't roll off.
yeah,
The jumps, they just made these peaks. So
yeah,
on those old bikes, you had to like literally land perfect. If you
yeah.
didn't, so a lot of times you just land front, with the rear wheel down, try to
Rear wheel
over jump
down.
them
Yeah,
because there was no downside.
yeah.
So
And
the tracks were,
the forks weren't good enough to
oh God, yeah, the
forks
bikes
weren't
were
good enough to land front wheel
just
first
slamming into this
or even
flat
flat land.
landing.
Yeah, no. So
Exactly,
you
exactly.
had to land rear wheel down. I can remember
You
that
had to
from
land perfect
myself.
or
Yeah,
land rear wheel down for sure,
yeah,
and the track the double, and then we got in the doubles and we got later on in the triples later, small stuff, but still the now the jumps are made to, perfect, kind of perfect. So if you're
mm,
short, you're not gonna, but still guys get hurt, so
yeah, for sure.
it
Yeah,
doesn't matter. They still look, when you're 20 feet up or whatever, it still looks like a wall coming back down, you know,
yeah,
even though they're more rounded than they used to be.
yeah,
I remember these at Daytona, they had these two at the end of the straightaway. They had these two jumps that were only like 2 feet high, but they were literally like 3 feet high, but like literally they look like pyramids. If you put them down on the ground, there's no ramp at all. And he had to jump like, it was like 60-mile-an-hour straightaway. Daytona was used to be really fast.
yeah.
And then for Supercross, you can imagine, the bikes
Mm.
were wide open now, this long straightaway, and you had to do this like 20-foot jump over these little pyramids, these little kickers,
Yeah,
this little, that
yeah,
was it. So it was funny, fun time.
yeah. The early
But I was
days
kind
of
of
those
I was a
tracks.
little anti. I'm sorry, Steve, but I was going to say I was always a little anti Supercross because the 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 I felt that the guys were taking a lot more risk already, even back
Mm,
then, and you weren't getting paid anymore for it.
yeah,
And I always felt like deep down I said, well, I'm not going to get hurt doing this if I'm not going to make any benefit, really
yeah,
benefit from it. And that's kind of the way it was. So I got by doing really well, racing, just pretty much focusing on the nationals and just making sure I didn't get hurt in the Supercross. So I could,
yeah.
because to me, the nationals are still more important at the time.
Oh, at the time,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. That was that was it. Yeah, and
Yeah.
then yeah, 19, yeah. So 77. You onto 250s and 500s as well. So
Yeah. I did. Well, back then, everybody would jump around between 250 nationals and 500 nationals or 125. If you had a weekend off, you could go ride the 250 national. If you were focusing on the 500, go jump into a 250 national or a 125 national. So you weren't, um, it was open for that. It's kind of really weird because basically you might miss one or two rounds, so you're really not in it for the championships, but they'll allow you to race in it and take points away from guys that are focused in it. So
mm,
it was kind of a funny rule that they had back then.
but it happened every year. It happened a lot up until I don't know. It was still happening in the 90s for sure.
Yeah, yeah, that's
Yeah.
right.
Doesn't
Yeah,
really happen anymore, does it? But yeah, that
yeah.
where people they'd jump in, especially with there was titles and that sort of thing. That they'd
Oh
stack
yeah,
they'd stack the pack and all that sort of thing. And
yeah.
yeah,
The team tactics alone, So if you have one guy that's battling tight with another guy, the points are really close. Well, you could bring all your guys from the 125 class and the 500
yeah,
class and go line up next to the guy you're trying to take
yeah,
out, for the
yeah, yeah,
championship. So that happens, and it's
yeah,
happened for sure.
yeah. Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. Many times,
So they can load them
many
up, load
stories,
them up.
many
Yeah.
many stories about that. And then obviously everyone knows that 77. Oh, not everyone knows, but people, historian types and people who are into their old moto know about that the 77 season with you and Brock coming down to the last round
Yeah. Yeah.
and all that sort of thing is that's all well documented. So you came so close,
Yeah.
so close there, yeah.
Yeah. Well, to me, I've only blamed myself for that because I other events during the season, I was so close to getting one more guy, or I had a lousy start, or I screwed up somewhere, or whatever it was. I just blame myself for that, not that, not whatever that happened with the, the signage and all that's what they
Mm.
did. But it doesn't really bother me, because we do that. We discuss that in the pits, as a team anyway.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, they
You
will
know,
do it. They just shouldn't have put a sign out.
exactly.
It's given us something to talk about for 30 years, though, and the
Yeah,
sign give us something to laugh about
totally.
nowadays. So
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. It's good story. I think it's a good story.
that's
Yeah.
a good story. Now,
Yeah.
obviously, I've seen you I've seen pictures of you at events with Brock and that sort of thing. So obviously, you're still mates afterwards.
Oh
So
yeah. We're really good friends. Yeah. And,
yeah,
I mean, Brock's an amazing guy. And, I think Brock is one of the most, you know, in our sport, there's not many rider guys that have dedicated themselves to the sport like Brock has, working,
mm,
like he does, and
yeah,
and getting involved. And he's like a super, he's really great in history about the sport.
mm.
So, he's one of a kind for sure.
He is, man. He is.
Yeah.
Absolutely, absolutely. And then, yeah, so I guess, 78, so 78, you were mostly on the 500, is that right? And then 79, you obviously
Yeah. The
won.
five. Yeah, that's right. I switched to the 500, and, 78, the bikes, um, crazy. Suzuki went from like around 12, 11 and a half inches of travel, 12 in 78, to like 13, 13 and a half. The things I could barely even, I'm only 5'9", but I could barely even get over the bike, put my
Yeah.
leg. I mean, it was so tall. We had to shorten the seats, and the bikes were really long. And the motor and the chassis were good, but they were so tall, and they thought that this was the answer. I don't know why. Maybe because it was Garrett Wolsink, or in Holland, the sand bumps, or
Yeah,
maybe that's where the idea came from, having this long travel.
yeah,
Which in some cases it works pretty well if you have bumps that are, you know, five 5 or 6 feet deep. It helps the wheel get down and follow the bumps, because the riding styles change. Now the bikes are stiffer, shorter, so they instead of, you're not, the idea is not to follow the bump, it's just to skip off the top of them,
yeah.
pretty much. So I think in Europe, that's kind of, in America, we were already into the hoops, and the, tracks were more square edge, small bumps, high speed stuff. Where in Europe, you had a lot more tracks with, a lot of the world championship tracks were deep sand at the time.
Mm,
Half the tracks were sand, so it kind of made sense.
yeah.
And anyway, with that long travel, they were tough to ride. And, so yeah, at least they figured out the fork snapping off at that time. but 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 they were tough to ride. So, but it was a good intro for me for the first year on a 500,
Mm,
and I think I won a few nationals, and then, and then had a good, good race at World Championships in '78 on that bike. Um, at Carl's, at the USGP at 500 on that
yeah.
bike. Actually, I did okay there, except on the last lap, I think I sheared off a countershaft sprocket. And, but yeah, so it was a good season, for me, in kind of intro into the 500. And, I learned a lot. And then 79 came. Yeah.
Yeah. The championship year.
Yeah. And then they went back down, lower bike, a little bit lower bike. And the bike was awesome. That bike was so amazing. I can still remember how it works, actually. It would
Mm,
turn so well. It tracked really well. It was just we used the Olean suspension on the rear, and,
okay. Yeah.
those shocks were, even though like, compared to, the monoshock, there were dual shock bikes when they had the really big boxy swing arms, the factory
Mm,
aluminum boxy shocks. With that, even with that 500, the power was so good. It was almost like a four-stroke in a way, where it made a lot of power at a low RPM,
yeah.
and then you could I could actually do what you can kind of do in a 4-stroke today is kind of turn, slide the bike, and the bike still hooks up.
Yeah.
Traditionally, a 2-stroke seemed like you kind of had to go in and turn, line it up, and go straight because
Yeah.
the power would hit, you go sideways, right?
Yeah.
And so that bike had good low power, mid, smooth, long power, and with that suspension, you could actually turn the bike in the bumps and still absorb the bumps at the same time. So it was kind of like a little bit more like a 4-stroke in a way today. And so that bike was awesome. And then they decided to change it after that.
Did they involve you guys in California at that stage? Were they involving you in testing for the new works bikes, or was that just all still like Europe focus?
Yeah, a little bit. I think I went to Japan a few times to test before the next season. So I did. I went to Japan with Suzuki to test bikes the previous, but I don't think I think the European guys did most of the work
Yeah.
because you had still DeCoster was on the team and he had a knowledge of the bikes
Mm.
at a higher level than any of us at the time. Thinking of, Roger was working with engineers already and suspension and linkages and hydraulics and chassis setup and offsets and all those kind of things. Roger understood a lot more than I think I did for sure at the time. But
Yeah.
at that time at Suzuki, I started learning a bit. But so um, fortunately they had DeCoster. He's always kind of been that kind of key guy wherever he's gone.
Mm.
He still understands, I think. Um,
Yeah, there's
how the
stories of him getting on the milling machine and making parts
yeah. Well,
for
in
bikes.
Belgium,
Yeah.
his house in Belgium, he had a shop. I mean,
Yeah.
he had everything in the shop. He could do everything. He had little mills and little lathes and all the machines he could do. So he was way ahead. He was really one rider that was interested in that and really worked really hard, harder than anybody. I mean, he was so disciplined, to I mean, I'd see him at night, get on the phone he would do texts after an event. I'd say, come on, Roger, let's go to dinner or something. And he was on the phone talking with the engineers in Japan after an event and writing down race results and calling Belgium and, from America like during the Trans Am series, which we used to
Yeah.
have.
Yeah.
And the guy was on top of it, as a racer. He was doing both,
Mm.
racing and work. He was interested in both all the time. So yeah, he definitely helped open a lot of people's. For sure, he helped me open my eyes. And then I started to help trying to apply that myself as well, which helped out a lot for me, I think.
Mm. Cool. And then so 1980, you're still on Suzuki?
Yeah, yeah. And that year we went to that full floating linkage. We had like the
Okay.
perfect bike. I could have raced that bike, I think, another 2 years, the dual shock bike. We didn't need a monoshock.
Yeah.
The only biggest advantage of the link was that you could get so it didn't bottom on G out stuff, right? You could limit from bottoming. With the 2-stroke. You didn't have a link, so you didn't change, the rate didn't change.
Yeah.
So you're just stopping it, slowing, but by slowing the linkage down, you actually interfere with the absorption of bumps too. So it's
Yeah.
good and bad, right? That link that gets in the way of the function of the hydraulics in a way.
Yeah.
So you just had to kind of slow a little bit at the face of a big G out,
Yeah.
Then we ran bigger bump rubbers, on the to stop it from bottoming out, or the chain, whatever on the chain had hit the little roller that kind of helped it from bottoming a little bit. All these little things that try to stop them from bottoming out. But all in all, so if you might one or two places on the track that you might bottom more, you just kind of, you knew that you kind of
Mm.
just let off the gas a little bit, slightly, and then you absorbed it with your body. You sucked the bike in, and then you'd go. So
Yeah.
you had the, but now with the link, when the links came in, the advantage of that was you could hit stuff straight on and not have to shut off
Yeah.
as much. So, but then that didn't work. That full floater just ricocheted off every square bump. It was like, it would just lock,
Yeah.
and it was really hard to ride. So it was a real rigid feeling.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then it didn't jive with the front and the chassis, so it didn't turn as well.
Yeah.
So everything was affected by that link,
Mm.
and I didn't like it. But they felt that they needed a monoshock, and that was
Yeah.
their first way into it. And so anyway, yeah, so it worked it did work okay, and they got it working better in a few years after that. But the
Yeah.
very first year there were a lot of
Yeah.
problems with it.
It's all
Yeah.
it's probably the same for all the brands. Their first,
Yeah.
the first Pro Link, the first Uni Track, and so on. It was,
Exactly. Yeah. And it's kind
yeah,
of a bummer because you have to kind of sacrifice the season, until you get it working right. Kind of. And at that time, it was kind of like that.
yeah,
And,
yeah,
but, well, and then so that was, and yeah, so that year, 81, so that was 80. And I, I think I only won maybe one race or something at the end in Florida, or I can't remember. I don't know. But it was tough. It was hard for me. It was a hard bike to ride, from one that works so well
mm,
to one that was, completely different. And then, yeah, that was a bummer.
mm. And then off to
But
Honda.
yeah, then Honda. Yeah, then, well, that was DeCoster's fault because he went to Honda,
Yeah.
and he was there already he was there already on 80.
Okay. Yeah.
Before we had to ride that full floater, he was already still racing the world championship at Honda. And then he retired at the end of 80, and he became the team manager at Honda in the US for 81.
Yeah.
And I said his fault was that he hired myself, Donnie Hansen, and Johnny O'Mara to
Mm,
move to Honda. And so that was a whole new thing. It was a hard thing for me because, back in those days, I think the riders were very loyal. I
yeah.
was really loyal. I think
Yeah.
I should have, I felt so guilty about leaving Suzuki.
Mm,
It was a hard thing for me to do, to talk to them and tell them I wasn't going to race there anymore, and that I was going to go on to Honda. And, but that's kind of funny, it was a tough thing for me.
mm. But yeah, you're right. A lot of riders from the 70s and 80s, a lot of them spent a lot of time on one brand, or they might have
Yeah.
changed once, but they're very rare did they change more than once, that sort
Yeah.
of thing.
I
So,
don't think it wasn't so much about the money as much as it is today.
mm,
Because all the factors were fairly close. Okay. They were at the time, whether you went from one team to another team, the amount you might make, okay, maybe it's $10,000, let's say $10,000 difference. So today that'd be maybe $100,000 difference.
yeah,
But is that really worth it? If you're going to give up something that, you're accustomed to, you've
mm,
built up a name with, you've kind of branded with it, and, it's not really worth the value. To me, it wasn't about the money. It was really, I think, just something new. And as for me, I knew if DeCoster was there, it was a way that I might get to Europe,
yeah,
because I'd ask Suzuki every year that every year I said, if there's ever an opening in Europe, and they always kind of, yeah, okay, we've got plenty of guys in Europe. We don't need an American racing in Europe on the world
mm,
title. That's kind of the way I felt.
yeah,
And with Roger, he knew how I always wanted to race in Europe. And so I said, well, if I'm ever going to be able to do that, that would be a good way to go. And so that was kind of helped make my decision to go over to Honda.
yeah. And in a roundabout way, it did get you to Europe.
It did.
Yeah,
It did.
got
And
you
I
noticed.
guarantee
Yeah,
that's what it was. I knew it deep inside, that's why I went that way.
mm,
And so I went to the Honda team, and Honda they were on the verge of, they were really, they had at that time, they really, they had a plan. And I think within 2 years after, even the next year, we had quite a bit of success already on the
Mm.
Hondas that very first year.
Yeah.
That next year, the bikes were insane, the 82
Yeah.
bikes.
Yeah. And they just won
They were,
everything. Yeah.
yeah, the bikes were just on another plant
Yeah.
level. There's, in some respects, they still are.
Yeah.
And, and unfortunately, I had gave up that option to go after I decided to stay in Europe to race for Yamaha. But I did get an offer from Honda again to go to ride the 82 bike in 83 and so on. And that would have been a great,
Mm.
those bikes were the bikes to be on.
Yeah.
And I gave that up just to go to Europe. So
But that paid off.
yeah, it did.
Yeah.
And it did.
Mm. Yeah. So, do
Yeah.
you remember, like? I'm sure you do. How did you get noticed? So obviously, it is very the 1981 Motocross of Nations and Trophy of Nations is super well documented, and which you're a part of, and the American team goes over there and wins for the first time. The all Honda team, the all young Honda team.
Yeah.
And obviously, so the Yamaha guys noticed you during those races, yeah?
Exactly. Yeah, that's right. So because the very first race was in Belgium, and Johnny and I both traded second. We were second. I was third and second, and he was second and third.
Yeah.
So, and then there was Andre Vromans, who's like the sand god, right?
Yeah, yeah,
And
yeah,
so no one was going to beat Andre that day for sure.
yeah.
But I mean, but it showed that we were that level.
Mm.
And so already, there was some hubbub going around. There were people talking about. I actually no. What I did was I knew someone that knew the team manager, which was Heikki Mikkola at the time
Yeah,
at Yamaha, and
yeah,
so I planted a seed. I said, maybe you can speak with them. I'm looking, to come to. Actually, already in Belgium at that event,
yeah.
and right away I did that, and that person did that, and so then we ended up going to Germany and then winning in Germany again.
Mm.
So they were looking for a rider, and then I actually got an offer before I even got to Germany from
Yeah,
Yamaha.
yeah, yeah.
So
Honda had
so that,
no opening for you to stay with Honda to do
no,
GPs?
because you could. I think at the time they just didn't believe. They didn't want to spend that kind of money on. They still didn't believe, and it was still controlled too by the forces in. No matter how great of an American rider was, that to break into that team, Honda team in Europe, you still had some good riders there, and some. They
Yeah,
didn't. They're not going to let somebody. You have to bump somebody off the team
yeah, because
to
they
get.
would have had like
I would have had to
Malherbe.
bump someone, and that wasn't going to happen.
Yeah,
There was Andre Malher was incredible, and
yeah.
I can't remember who was the other guy.
Probably was Noise still there, maybe.
Noise,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
And
So that,
I was willing to write a 500. I'm fine with a 500. I actually would have liked to prefer to start on a 500 because I had already been writing a 500,
mm,
and I did well in Germany on the 500. So I was ready to go on a 500, but the only opportunity came was on the 250 at Yamaha, and I was fine with that.
mm,
Yeah,
yeah,
and that was another story because you can imagine. So I had left Suzuki after 5 years, and
yeah,
then 1 year with Honda. I mean, I'm sorry, with 1 year with Honda.
yeah.
It was really difficult for me to tell now Roger that I was going to go because I knew that Johnny, Donnie, and I all had a place in the U.S. for the next season, and Roger offered me a deal.
Mm,
And I had to say, no, I'm going to go race in Europe. And Roger knew that that's what I wanted to do anyway, all the time. So
yeah,
he was really happy for me.
yeah,
And it all worked out good for everyone. Honda had, they had a great season the very next year. Donnie Hansen wins everything. Johnny O'Mara wins everything. They dominated. And
yeah,
I think that was because they were just, they were starting to, you know, it shows you those guys 3 months later won everything.
Mm.
From
Yeah,
that,
that's right.
you know
Yeah.
what I'm saying? Johnny was Grand National champion. He won Supercross, National
Yeah.
Outdoor. Johnny won
Yeah.
so it was no fluke. The guys were,
Yeah.
it wasn't a B team.
That's for sure.
They were just
They
on their
just
way.
caught they just caught the wave of you guys early, didn't they? With that
Yeah, right. Exactly. It
that
was a
yeah.
timing, I think. Yeah.
Yeah,
And it
yeah.
was really good because I think that actually, I have to say that there was no race, or even when I won a world championship, nothing compared to the day that we won the Nations,
Yeah.
or the very in Lummel. I mean, the whole world was just, thought it ain't going to happen, So,
Yeah.
uh,
Yeah. It's it's amazing. It's an amazing
yeah,
story. I was talking to Donnie about it
yeah,
and that, yeah, and I think it's really cool when you guys still catch up sometimes. You know,
yeah.
the team catches
Oh,
up. You know, there
we
was
still
something.
feel, all of us have that connection, and it's
Yeah.
really special because there's nothing happened in my motocross career that compares to that
Mm.
moment. It was just crazy. The see everyone in Belgium just like almost like their jaws are on the ground, right? And
Yeah. Yeah.
the whole world, it just was so amazingly, so great. It's like, I don't know, winning everything in the Olympics. Some Americans
Yeah.
winning every whatever it was at the time. So I it's hard to compare.
Mm.
But it was so lucky to be part of that team, at that time, and
Yeah.
we all there was a Chuck's son as well. We all had such a great time, and um, yeah,
It's
uh,
yeah. It's one of the greatest stories, I think, of this in this in you know of the sports history. I think it's amazing. Yeah.
I'll give. It was a really funny thing. I always tell this story, and it might sound silly, but I have to give. I always give DeCoster credit for this, but one day we're at this is another reason why the Americans never won. We never went as a team, or now, I shouldn't say never. Maybe we didn't have the riders, but we were never. Bob Hanna might have went with on his bike, and then another rider on another bike was maybe Jimmy Weiner. I can't remember the different riders. Ken
Yeah.
Howerton had gone, but they were all went as individuals and met over there, and they all had ran out of different trucks, so it wasn't really organized.
Yeah.
There's a lot of things you need that, when we went as a Honda team, it was we kind of had Roger had kind of control over the whole thing,
Yeah.
and so all the tactics and everything that go on, and the tracks and so here's a little example is Roger, we're all ready to go to the race, the first race at Lummel, and Roger says, I think Johnny and I and Donnie were all out practicing, Chuck's son. He says, someone's got to go out and do a 45-minute moto on one of these 250s in the sand, because we don't even know if it'll go 45 minutes in the sand, and you're in Lummel. And we're all, yeah, what? We did it in America. Why can't we do it here? No, someone's got to go. So I think myself and maybe Donnie Hansen or Johnny, we went out for 45-minute moto for 140. We both ran out of gas.
Oh.
And
Yeah.
we wouldn't even made it,
Yeah.
around Lummel. Lummel's worse than where we were practicing at Zolder, and the track wasn't as deep and gnarly as Lummel.
Yeah.
So we would have been out 3 laps before the finish, 4
So
laps. I don't know.
what did you do? Like, you had
We
other tanks or?
Yeah, they went and got rounded up the tanks off of the 500s,
Ah, okay.
and they
Yeah.
fit on, so they were bigger tanks.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And so a little
Lucky.
side story there, but
It's lucky
yeah.
that you did that though.
Yes, that's what it means. That
Yeah.
we were lucky that we had someone that thought about that,
Mm.
If we were teams like we had gone before, when no one would have
No.
thought about that. We would have been clueless, And I don't think we've ever ridden in sand that deep and that as Lummel. It's just to keep it's amazing at Lummel. The bumps are so big and deep and so long at the time. It's kind of, they were like hills, the bumps, and you drop
Yeah.
into these
Yeah.
craters, and you coming out of a turn, you just have the full throttle pinned, just to keep the bikes going, you know. And it's amazing they even survived air-cooled bikes back then, but they did.
Yeah, yeah. It's amazing, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, cool, cool. So onto your world championship year. So yeah, and your rival was Joe Bay. You
Yeah.
and Joe Bay. Yeah.
That was
Then,
great. It was such great memories, and so sad what about George,
mm,
gone way too soon.
mm,
You know, we had 2 years of, you know, more than 24 races, you know, head to head pretty much the whole time. And
yeah,
yeah, so it was, I, yeah, it was awesome. We had
mm,
2 great years. Actually, I think I rode better the second year than I did the first year,
yeah,
but I broke down. I had 2 DNFs in one race, so 50 points, you're toast.
yeah.
But um, but I had my both years were amazing with George. He's such a we had a lot of fun together too. He was a good competitor. You know, he
Mm,
was he was a good guy. I liked him. You know, he was, and I learned a lot from him too. You know, racing. I mean, he was they were he had his own like entourage of people. He had a system set up. His brother, his mother, his dad were all at the races, most of the races. So they
mm.
had this, you know, really. And I was kind of this outsider guy, you know, alone in Europe, right, against the Joe Bay, the big Joe Bay clan,
Entourage.
and
Yeah,
huh?
he had an entourage.
Yeah, big one. And but that's what kind of fired me up, you
Yeah.
know. That was the I could see that right away, and it made me really focus, you know, that I
Mm,
knew I had to. And but actually, honestly, George and his brother, yeah, his brother would help him out a lot too on the track, but they would help me too as well. I mean, you know, they give me tips and things, and it's kind of like they were really good family,
mm.
and they were really nice people. So I had a, although we were competitors, and actually a lot of the European guys would give me tips. You know, even I'd go practicing with you know, my lines and stuff. And Eric Gubors, and he he'd give me tips, and then I was practicing at this one track in Belgium. I'll never forget. This is awesome, and I was doing laps on this track, and I come in and I see this guy sitting having a drink at the bar. There's always bars at the track in Belgium, little cafe, and they're sitting out there having a beer.
Yeah,
And Joel Weber is sitting there watching. You know, he's obviously
yeah.
6-time world champion, and I mean, I'm shy. I'm not going to go introduce myself to him. And he comes to me, he says, "Hey, Danny," you know, you should try. He goes, "I notice when you're riding, you're always trying to go to the same speed out there on the track." He goes, "Try this. Go one lap fast and then one lap a little slower. One lap fast and one lap a little bit slower. Don't always just go wide open." And I thought, well, that's pretty smart. Anyway, that was a Joel Robert tip, you
Yeah,
know,
yeah. That's it.
because you know, you actually kind of give yourself a rest and you think a little bit rather than you're going fast all the time. You don't fix your problems, you know, on the
Yeah,
track, your
yeah.
lines. I guess maybe he saw that. It's just maybe he saw a bunch of chaos out there. But anyway, that was actually in '82 when
Yeah.
yeah, that was cool.
What was Heike like? He always looks like he looks just like such an intimidating person.
He is,
He is, yeah.
because he's gnarly. I mean, that, you know, he really hard training guy. I mean, when after I went to Yamaha, the very first thing he wanted to test all the riders, we had to go to Finland, and he had it set up with I think it was the University of Helsinki to use their training facility. You know, and they're really, I mean, you have the level of, you know, cross country skiers. You know, they had a lot of research on this kind of, you know, type of
Yeah.
endurance sports, and he kind of, I think at the time, brought that. It was a big deal, you know, and so uh, I think I learned a lot as well. I had been training. At Honda we had Jeff Spencer as a physical kind of like, you know, coach and trainer, and he was really great. And then and I still for years I followed his program that he laid out for me 2-3 years after that while I was racing in Europe. But then Hickey also added something to it. I think
Mm.
the tracks in Europe, he was really strong, so a lot of stuff on the core and the back and workout, mostly, and high intensity stuff in the gym where you do circuit training, and you do like for 45 minutes you do this. No, actually, an hour. It was over an hour. But you do a circuit of 22 different positions with a certain amount of time between each one, so you could recover a little recovery. Then you go back and you're back, and it was pretty intense at the time. So it added as well to my program, I guess. And so but he was hardcore. He trained really hard. Physically, he was really strong. You can kind of tell by the way
Yeah.
he used to race. He was
Yeah.
really solid on the bike.
Yeah.
And I
Absolutely.
think
Yeah.
he was probably the strongest guy out there, maybe
Yeah.
next to Håkan Carlquist, right? They
Yeah.
both kind of
Yeah.
had
Yeah. That's right.
the
They,
power, the
they look
power.
like if the bike broke down, they could throw it over their shoulder and just run the rest of the
Exactly.
way. Yeah. That's it. Yeah.
Both, I think the Swede and the Finns were pretty tough. But I had some great stories with Heikki. Was able to go and spend time with him, and we went. Actually, we went out and went in the mountains and did saunas, and in the winter,
Yeah.
the middle of the winter,
Yeah.
into the
Yeah.
super intense saunas. I mean, unbelievable how hot they get them, and they slap each other with these birch leaves, and I think with leaves, some kind of leaves, a bundle of leaves. It's already so intense
Yeah.
you could barely breathe, and then they're hitting each other with these, slapping each other on the back. It's so hot you want to quit. Maybe it's part of the training program.
Yeah.
And then you go jump in the ice.
Yeah.
They had a hole cut in the ice,
Yeah.
and so they were pretty tough people, the
Yeah. Yeah.
Finns.
Ahead of their time with the hot and cold therapy.
Oh yeah, that's
That's
exactly.
that's all the trend now, isn't it? You got to have the hot.
Yeah, it is. Their
You got to
problem is
have
they
the
like vodka
yeah.
too much.
Oh, okay. Don't drink too much. Yeah.
After the training, it was vodka time.
Yeah.
No, no, not really. I'm joking.
Yeah. It yeah. The vodka helps with the cold, I suppose.
Yeah, it was really intense. That was part of the training program, I guess.
Yeah.
Toughen up.
Yeah. And then after that you did onto the 500s
Yeah,
for the GPs. Yeah. So that's 84.
yeah. After the 250 year, the 250 era, I was 1 and 2 there, and then Yamaha. This was a big thing, and kind of a little bit of a mistake in my career I made. I think I would have been have had more patience. But to me, in my mind, I've always wanted to reach a goal and then move on. I was getting already bored of flying in America, for example, Holiday Inn every weekend, or the same hotels, the same everywhere you go. It's the same thing, the
Mm.
same. We're in the same. And I was just losing a little bit of motivation, and that's why the Europe thing was really
Yeah.
exciting for me to be able to try something new. And I just want to reach a goal and go on and then win a world champ. So after the 250 title, I said that Yamaha at that time in 84, I had a contract for 84, but Yamaha had financial problems. And the whole world, the economy for motorcycle, Yamaha was at the time was in a battle with Honda, kind of like a production battle,
Yeah.
and warehouses were filling up and they weren't selling bikes.
Mm.
So, Yamaha said, okay, basically we quit, we give up, you win to Honda,
Yeah.
and they had warehouses of bikes everywhere, and the economy had slowed and the bike sales slowed worldwide. And so Yamaha said, we can't afford to anymore. So 84, they wanted me to stay in the 250 class. And I said, no, I can't stay another year. I got to move. I got to get in the 500 class if I want to. And so I there weren't enough money. There wasn't a budget for two factory to no to pay for the cost to have two guys out on the track, and then there were enough bikes, but there was enough budget for the rest.
Yeah.
So Mick Håkan Karlquist found an outside sponsor to pick up the tab. Is called Lumaca. It was called a snail in Italian. It was, I can't remember what the company did, but Håkan offered me a deal to be on this team with factory bikes, and I thought, no, I don't see it that way. I didn't want to do it, so I basically took the same type of bike they raced in America. It was a factory bike with special parts. It was a production bike with special parts. Håkan kept those bikes, and he offered the bikes that he had extra bike, the full factory 500s, those aluminum frame, to, I think it was Lundqvist at the time. He had another Swedish guy. So he took those bikes. And I said, no, I'm going to go out and ride production-based bikes.
Yeah.
And that was kind of a stupid mistake. I should have stayed on that team with Håkan, because at the time, the bikes that we were racing in America, they had to switch over to production bike, the ruling, and Yamaha, because of the financial difficulties and everything.
Yeah.
So I was going to have to race this bike against, you imagine at the time, the full factory Kawasaki's, Jobei were on, and then the Hondas, the full factory Hondas, the Suzuki's, they were all amazing bikes. And so I was on this production-based bike with factory suspension and factory cylinder and some parts, but it just wasn't up at the time. Couldn't compete against all those bikes in the 500 class. So, and I did okay the first 3 or 4 races. I was placing up in I was getting into the top 10, and still for the first year on the 500, that's okay. And then one of the riders, Håkan, had hurt himself, and I knew he hurt himself. And then I had to go to Sweden, I think, for the next GP, or was it Finland or Sweden? I think Sweden. And I said, to Yamaha, I said, well, those bikes, he can't race. He's hurt. He's out. Why don't you let me, ask him if I can use his bikes, right, to race? Because I needed to get out I needed it on a real bike, or a bike that was better. That was competing against the Hondas and the Kawasaki's at the time. And they said no. The team Håkan doesn't want you to use the bikes. He was out for the season pretty much.
Yeah.
I said, bummer. Okay. And it was kind of because he had the budget from that company to pay for it. So it was his decision. And so I said, well, if I don't get the bikes, I'm not coming. This is me. Anyway, I didn't show up at the next GP, and I quit pretty much.
Yeah.
And because of my contract, they had to continue to pay me, but because they couldn't provide the factory bikes that they had promised in the contract. So, and I was done.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I just went back to America, that's kind of, and
home.
I really regret that. It was stupid because, I was too anxious. I was just too pissed off,
Bit of
and I made a brash decision. I should have just hung in there, because I really wanted a shot at the 500 class. And so that was on me. And it was probably my biggest regret, I think, in motocross.
Yeah.
Is not hanging in there and doing what Yamaha asked me to do. And then I came back to America, and Mark Blackwell, my old team manager, at the end of '84, I left, went back to America. And when Mark Blackwell was managing the Suzuki team, and he asked if I'd race, he was putting together a program for Husqvarna's. He had a sponsor, Autolite, spark plug company. And I said, yeah, shoot, why not? I'm not doing anything. So I rode those bikes at some of the Supercross events, and I was going to Sweden to do testing at Husky. And then I was running all around the world doing different development work and stuff. And then for them, and they had this plan to come back at the time, which never really worked out. And I had one good race at a GP in Finland. And on the 500 class, actually, I think I finished one moto like fourth or something behind all the Hondas.
Yeah.
So it was pretty good. And then on the Husky, it was
Yeah.
pretty. That was my big deal. I got back over there and did that, and then I went back to do the national in Colorado, and my son had just been born, Shane, and I was play riding on the Husky 500. It was a 500 class on Husqvarna.
Yeah.
And we were just playing, and I was doing this big road jump, goofing around, and I was like fourth gear downhill up this other hill and jumping over the road, and I clipped neutral, and I went over and piled myself into the side of the hill.
Yeah.
I was obviously mountain, and broke my femur. And that's kind of was the end of my motocross career.
Yeah. Was that 85 Husky? Was that still a twin
that
shock?
was 85. Yeah.
Was that still the twin shock?
No, that was the monoshock bike.
It was, yeah, because they hung in the twin shocks for a fair while there into the 80s. There.
Yeah, that was the monoshock bike.
Yeah.
It was a tank. It actually handled good, but it was just heavy.
Okay.
And the motors were a little slow. So yeah. But the bikes got them working really well. I mean, they handled really well. They did all that well, but they're just heavy and slow.
Yeah. And then
heavy and slow. That's all. They're just heavy and slow.
Yeah, that's it. And then after moto, Danny, what was next? Is that Baja or Dakar was next? Baja was next.
So I was back home in America, and it was like 86 went by and 87. And I was starting to do little, just for fun. I rode a little bit, not too much. 2 years I didn't even ride. And then trail rode a little bit, but not too much for like 2.5 years, nothing. And then Mark Johnson at Kawasaki, he was a team manager for their off-road program. And he calls me out of the blue, and he says, "Hey, Laporte," he goes, "Why don't you interested to do some events for us, like the Baja 1000?" And he knew I wasn't up doing much. And I said, "Yeah, I'll give it a go." So I went out testing, and it was really a lot of fun because Kawasaki just started getting it there. They've been racing a couple seasons and Baja, and Yamaha was still out there racing Baja. Honda had a team. Kawasaki had a team, Husky had a team. So it was still KTM had a team. So it was still really competitive in Baja at that time. And I said, well, that'd be cool, And so it was really a good opportunity for me because I'd already been looking ways to get to race the Dakar rally. So this was a way for me to show if I get some experience racing in the desert.
Yep.
And I'd been in contact with a couple of teams in Europe already about racing Dakar, but they said, you're a motocross guy. It's never going to work. It's too dangerous, blah, blah, blah. And I said, okay. So it was kind of all worked out. And I went racing with Kawasaki with Mark Johnson, Larry Rossler, Ted Honeycutt at the time, and Paul Krause were teammates. We were three on a team, but sometimes it was Paul Krause, myself, and Larry Rossler, and with Ted Honeycutt sometimes. It just depended. But so I raced the Baja 500, the Baja 1000, and then the Mint 400, and 3 races a year. And it was great. It was awesome. Had a wonderful time. And then it was really neat because it was just something completely new. And then so we ended up winning the 1000 3 times. We won the 500 3 times, and then we won the Mint 400, I think, or it was the Parker. I think the Parker. It was the Parker 400, and we won that as well. I think a few times.
Yeah.
So that kind of, and every year actually. Okay, so I got every year when we'd won 1000, I'd call Jean-Claude Olivier in France. He was the head of Yamaha France. He was president of Yamaha France. Say, Jean-Claude, what do you think? If you ever have an opportunity, a spot for me on the team, I'd love to race. And he's the one that said, no, it's too dangerous. Motocross guys it's not a good idea. You're racing in the desert. I said, yeah, but I grew up riding in the desert in America. And so actually when the first 5,000, I called him. He says, no, you need more experience. Go ride some more. We won the 1,000 again, the 500 again. I'd call him every year. I'd call him and send him a note or whatever. It kept bothering him. So finally, after the 3 times we won in 90, he said, okay, I'll give you a slot on the team to race the Faroes Rally.
Yeah.
And I ran over too, and I did the Moroccan Rally on a Kawasaki 500. In the meantime, I just came over, bought some suspension and an exhaust pipe that we used in the parts that we used in the 1,000.
Yeah.
And I threw them on a 5KX 500 and had a sponsor. And then we raced. I got this just a little experience, to kind of feel what Africa's about. Yeah. So I kept doing that. And finally he invited me and he gave me a spot on the team. And, the first race I did for Yamaha was the Faroes Rally in 1990. And I think I won like 7 stages, but I kept cutting the course and getting disqualified because I missed checkpoints. I did everything possible. I had no clue what I was doing, right?
The navigation.
So I was kind of out of the race. I got penalized so many times, but I was just in it to win the stages. So I started and I just hauled ass every day as fast as I could and win the stage. It's easy when you're coming from behind in a rally, if you're back, because you can just follow the tracks in the desert. You don't have to pay attention to navigate. Well, at least for me, it was that way. I would just track everybody down and I'd win the stages. So it was kind of funny. Anyway, that was my first experience racing in a big rally. Anyway, it was with Yamaha in the Faroes Rally in Egypt, and then the Dakar Rally was the next race, which is the biggest event.
Yeah,
and I think the 7th day of the rally, I crashed outside Agadez, and for 14 days, I don't remember anything. So I crashed and I had a lung contusion, heart contusion, and my brain was swelling.
Yeah.
And the medics got to me. They had to put a tube in my lungs so I could breathe. And I flew back to Paris and I was in intensive care for 2 weeks. I remember nothing. And my swelling went down my brain. And then I kind of came they got me off the breathing machine. And anyway, to make a long story short, I'm okay. And Jean-Claude Olivier says, see, that's why I didn't want a motocross racer racing in Dakar. And remember, the reason why, it was just before that Andre Mahler crashed. And he was paralyzed racing Tunisia, and he was a motocross rider. And Jean-Claude, despite all of the warnings, having another motocross guy, that's kind of what he was telling me. He didn't want it happening again. And it nearly happened again, So he didn't, and he was pissed actually at me a little bit because he just wanted me to, not pissed, but he just wanted me to settle down and, just take it easy. Don't go. I think I was just too hyper on racing out there. Just like the motocross, a motocross guy who just wants to go fast. And there's so many different obstacles in the desert, you're not used to, and you're going a lot higher speeds than you're used to, and things come up. We're motocross guys. We're looking at things that we first ride around the track 3 or 4 times just to learn the obstacles.
Yeah.
Right. And then we know every little rock, every little cigarette butt on the track by heart.
Yeah.
So in the desert, shoot, you're going 100, those big twins back then will go 130 miles an hour in the dirt. I mean, the 450s today will barely go 95. Well, they claim they're barely going 100. Those big twins would go 130 in the dirt. So that's like a whole nother world. And things come up so quick, so when you're trying to read the terrain, you're looking out, and all of a sudden there's a crevice or a washout or a oed, they call them in in Arabic, I think. And they appear, these things, you're not used to it. Any little thing, sand dunes, going through sand dunes, you get mesmerized a little bit. You don't realize how fast you're going across the dunes, and you look down, you're going so fast. It's almost like you can get out and touch the sand with your hand. You feel like you're going slow, but you're going really fast. It's weird.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden you're in the air, right? You're flying because it just looks flat and perfect. Then all of a sudden it just drops away. So stuff like
Yeah.
that. Just an example of motocross guys going to, and I had a lot of friends like Scott Harden. He's another American guy. He gave me some good tips. He says, you got to scan your eyes, all look forward, look out, look back, look out. You got to look way out. You can't just look in your front wheel. So motocross guys, we tend to look just in front of us a little bit, not so far out. And so it is truly hard to change from motocross to racing off road like that. So
Yeah. And how many years did you do Dakar?
I did it 4 times, 4 Dakars.
Yeah.
And got second that one year in Cape Town, which Peter Hansel won. And I won the Pharaohs Rally in Egypt. And so I did okay for the first, then I DNF the rest of the time. I crashed. I dislocated my shoulder one time in the last year I raced in Africa on a KTM. Kenny Gardner, he's so funny. Anyway, we were talking about this. We were making all these funny stories. You know what we should do? We both, this year it was 95, I think, 95 or 96, the last time I raced it. And we were both, I was doing all right. I think it was still in the top 5 or 6 on the KTM. I didn't race the year before, but I raced this year. I think it's 95 or 96. And anyway, Kenny Garner goes, we shouldn't be doing this. What are we doing out here? Right. Kind of like, and then he was just kind of getting into doing the rallies and things like that. So that the next day he hurts his leg and I dislocate my shoulder and I woke up in out of the tent there where the doctors put me out so I could pop my shoulder back in. And I wake up, I got his arm in a sling. I walk out and Kenny Gardner's got a cast up to his hip. We look at each other and I go, it was kind of funny, story, things like that. Never forget. But what are we doing out here, these motocross guys? So, but it's just a really, great adventure. It was amazing to do it. I think Africa is special. So we at least got the race when it was in Africa still. So it was a great time. Yeah.
Amazing. Yeah.
Righto, it's time for an ad read. Greg's Ultra Trick Seats. That's what Guts Racing stands for. Ken Roxon, Lucas Courden, RJ Hampshire, Jed Beaton, Kai de Wolf, riders from all over the world winning races this year on a Guts seat. Also on a Guts seat, not winning races, but winning hearts, is the likes of Phil Nicoletti and Malcolm Stewart. You can obviously get a seat cover from Guts. You can also get complete seats, custom seats with the seat bump, the ultralight seat foam, replacement seat foams. You can get the wide wing seat if you want a bit more width and grip around the knees. You can get a tall seat if you're a lanky sort of fella. There's a huge range of colors. If you can think of it, you can probably get it. You can even get a Velcro fitment seat instead of if you don't want to tackle the old job with the staple gun. Speaking of fitment, your Guts order comes with a bunch of QR codes that you can scan, which will take you to a video where you will see maybe even the man himself, Andy Gregg, showing you how to install that seat cover. That's pretty cool. As Scott Meshy says, privateer hero Scott Meshy, he is a Guts athlete, and he said on the show they are a butt gripper and they will make you a ripper. So absolutely get around at gutsracing.com. That's a real easy one to remember. Gutsracing.com. And thanks to Guts Racing, we are having a contest where we're giving away a Guts seat cover. The contest is open to veterans. If you are a veteran who rides or a veteran whose kids ride, all you need to do is email me at AussieSteve569 at gmail.com, AussieSteve569 at gmail.com, or just DM me on either of my Instagrams. I reckon if you're listening to the show, you probably already follow me on Instagram, so that should be pretty straightforward. All I want is a bit of a story on your military life and your moto life. Just a brief on your military life. I don't expect too much detail there. But I want some detail on your moto life. I want to know how much you love riding or how much you love watching those kids ride. And yeah, the entries will go to my friends who are veterans and moto fans, of course, Cody and Felipe. They are the two gentlemen who helped me out on the military appreciation show that we did a little while ago. And they will choose a winner and we'll get a gut seat cover out to you. So get those entries in. Not many entries in so far. So, so rip into that and score yourself a seat cover thanks to Guts Racing, gutsracing.com. Okay, let's head on back in and see what more Danny Laporte's got to say. Cheers.
And then since I don't know heaps about what you've been up to since you're racing. I know you worked for FMF. Is that right? You worked.
Yeah. Well, yeah. After I came back from the rallies and doing that stuff in 90, I moved back from Europe. I was living in France until 97. And then 98 and came back and I went to work with Donnie and pretty much we've been friends. I mean, Donnie helped me as a junior rider way back when he had his business and everything. And he always said, hey, when you quit racing, come back to work for me, when I was living in Europe. And so I came back. And then in 98, I started working on at FMF and trying to put together, we had the Honda team. We put that together. And I kind of got us into that mess. It was a good time though. It was a lot of work, but FMF had our own race team.
Yeah.
And 98, 99 and 2000. And then after that was over, we had a 3-year deal and then we didn't want to continue. We realized it wasn't our thing to race. Donnie wanted to focus on spending his money more on all the teams rather than just one team.
Yeah.
Spread the money out, kind of try to equally rather than being just on one type of team, getting known just to be one brand. And because there's so many brands, so he just didn't want to be, he wanted to spread his money out. You can get so hooked on motocross, you can. It was taking a lot of energy from other things at the shop.
Yeah.
So, but it was a good thing for the 3 years. It was a good promotional thing for a period of time. So, and that ended, and then I ended up staying, working with Donnie on R&D and production, and then we've been friends forever. So, we were right. I think I rode with him more than anybody I think ever in my entire life. We literally probably rode 30 days a year out in the desert, in the mountains, 20, 30 days a year for, I think, nearly 20 years, so it was a lot, we rode a lot and went through a lot of bikes, a lot of broken levers and handlebars, boondocking across the mountains with Donnie. Donnie's really competitive, actually. So it's a lot of fun to ride with him. He would have been a great racer, Emler, Donnie. Yeah. He's super focused and he wants to win. So even, it's great to ride with him, to hang out with him, and he's really competitive. It's a lot of fun. And then we do testing too, so we bring a bike out and we'll throw pipes on bikes and do a loop and then come back and throw another pipe on and do another loop or just go on little motocross tracks out there. We'll just throw stuff on, and him and I will just test stuff back and forth. We have test riders. We have all the greatest off-road riders and motocross guys. So it's not like we're really gonna. But Donnie still keeps up with it. He can go up. We have these giant sand dune hills that we climb, and it doesn't care what level you are. You're full throttle, so you can play with the throttle. So he does a lot of. He can feel the stuff himself pretty well.
Yeah.
And then, so you listen to all the writers, you listen to the magazine guys, you listen to everybody, and then we formulate come up with our own
So
ideas.
you're still helping FMF out nowadays. You still help me out nowadays?
Now, it's been almost 2 years that I kind of retired. So retired, I don't know. I didn't really retire, but retired. I guess you can say that, anyway. Yeah, I'm not working at FMF because I'm 67 now, so that time flies, man.
Yeah.
But
you still ride that I forget the name of the race that Mickey Diamond goes over to.
Yeah, in Italy, yes. Transborgaro.
That's the one. You go over to that, don't you?
Yes, Jeff Stanton goes, and Ricky Johnson's been there, and Ronnie Lachine, and a lot of different guys go every time, try to find somebody new. But I've been quite a few times. I think maybe 4 or 5 times I've done it, and 6 times or so. But it's kind of fun. Gives something to go get ready for. Go practice a little bit. I go to Glen Helen and try to do a few laps, and then go over a race every year. So and Brock Glover goes actually.
Yeah.
So it's a lot of fun. Those fun. A lot of guys show up there from, road racers, guys, retired road race guys, and enduro riders, and all world champions from all over. Kind of come down there one time or another. So it's a lot of fun, and we ride modern bikes, which I like. A lot of these events, guys ride vintage stuff.
Yeah,
and they're I don't trust them. I didn't trust them back then. Can you imagine flying off a jump with some 1980 hub or wheel or whatever?
Yeah. You remember the days when they used to break?
Yeah, I know. And to find parts for those things isn't so easy. And but anyway, no, their vintage bike is it's kind of fun to go out and see them and look at them. I rode a vintage event not long ago up in Idaho.
Okay.
And it's in Boise. They have it every year as well. There's one they have, and I rode a Yamaha 1972 Yamaha 250, or 73 YZ 250. One of the very first.
One of the first ones. Yeah.
Yeah, and actually wasn't so bad. It was just no suspension and no power band, but it was okay.
Yeah, I love the vintage bikes. Yeah, I love it.
You ride vintage bikes? You ride vintage?
My bikes. I only have 80s and 90s bikes, but I don't have a 70s bike yet, but I want to have one. Yeah, and I've ridden them before, and but not my own. I love this. Something about it. I don't know what it is. It's just something that takes me back to seeing them when I was a kid and that sort of thing, I guess. Yeah. And aluminium tanks and twin shocks and air cooled and all that. Like I just said, I reckon it's awesome. Yeah. It just puts a smile on my face. Yeah.
Yeah. I know. That's cool. That's good.
Yeah.
Yeah. If they're really well prepared, they're not bad. But everything kind of gets clapped out, everything gets stretched and yeah, back then I think that's kind of like now the bikes. I think they all but the engines. I think the chassis and everything last. They're pretty sturdy, and the forks and the hubs and all that kind of stuff are pretty good. It's just some of the old 4-stroke motors kind of get hammered. I think the 2-stroke engine seems to still it can maintain the power. Just a little work, some piston and rings. You get the power back pretty good, but the 4-stroke, you need a lot more work on the engine, I think.
More maintenance. Yeah, it is more
Yeah,
maintenance.
exactly.
Yeah. Absolutely. Danny, I've just got just a few other little different questions for you. What do you so now, not so much now that you're retired, but when you were when you were super busy with racing, how did you relax? What did you do to relax? Or did you relax?
Yeah, let me see, what did I do to relax? I was super hyper all the time. I mean, I never really slowed down, too much. But I guess hobbies besides motorcycling, I really never had hobbies outside of just riding. I rode a little bit of mountain biking and things like that, but I never really got into cycling or anything like that too much. But I don't know, just trying to. I don't know. I don't know. That's a good point. What
You'd be surprised. It's not unusual for moto guys, especially or it's not unusual for successful people to not be able to answer that question. So because
don't know.
you don't relax much because you're so driven. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I know I've always got something in my mind. I've always got to do something. Something better than what I've done or something. I've always got that on my mind, which is good and bad. But it's kind of a burden too, I always set goals and things. But it's I get really antsy. I got to always do something. I work around the house. I work on try to fix things, keeps me busy now. I'm traveling, I like to travel and so I got to set goals for sure. A lot of little goals all the time. I'm here in Norway, I try to walk every day and visit the kids. And then I'm going to go to southern France and then train all summer down there with some friends and in France and start riding. I have a lot of trails in southern France. I know that I lived just near Saint-Tropez for quite a few years, 7 years, and have a place down there. So I'll head down there and trail ride out of that zone. There's trails everywhere down there actually. And then I'll do some mountain bike riding and then a little swimming and running and eating and drinking and then by the end of summer, I'm going to do this vintage ride in Italy.
No,
it's in Camerino, and it's it's an vintage enduro. So I'm going to ride a KX 125, 87 KX 125.
Yeah,
but because it's just my friend's building the bike in France, and they're going to bring it over. So I'm actually riding on a French team. So it's just all for fun anyway. But and my buddies, they did a lot of riding themselves at an amateur level type racing, and so we're going to come over, go to do this. I think it's a 3 or 4 day enduro.
Yeah,
and it's kind of like an ISDE format.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so it'll be interesting. So I have to get ready for that.
Yeah, it sounds fun. Yeah, the vintage enduro stuff's starting to get big down here too, and I'm always looking at maybe getting a bike for that. And
yeah, they have that. This event's getting every year. They have it. It's a World Vintage Enduro Championship. So you should check it out. Yeah,
it's
Italy. In Camerino. Yeah. It's not far from Florence.
Yeah,
and I just found out about it. I don't know, 6 months ago. My buddies were telling me about it. I said, "Yes, I'll go." And then the American guys asked me to be on their team. I already committed to be on the French guys' team. So all my American buddies are going to be over there.
Who's the American team?
I think it's Chili White, Chili. Fred Host is one of them, and I think I can't remember the other guy right now. I think they were, I don't know, I can't remember, but I can't remember who the team is going to be. Some are going to be individual, I think, as well. But I didn't know it was that big of a deal, And they build their bikes in America. They ship them over. So it's a
Well,
pretty
they
big
do
deal.
at the 6 days. They do a vintage 3 day, I think. That runs like at the same time as the 6 days now. Yeah, because I know there's a Aussie legend, Jeff Ballard. He went over and did that event a couple of times there with his Mako. Yeah, and I think it's a 3 day instead of the 6 day.
Yeah,
They did
this is.
the
I
first
think this
three
is it.
days.
I think this is it. It's a 3 day,
Okay.
and it's in
Yeah.
September.
Yeah.
So yeah. So I think this is the same event.
It might be. Yeah.
Jeff will be there probably for sure.
Yeah.
Ballard.
Yeah.
He's another ex-motocrosser that became an enduro rider.
That's right. Yeah.
I raced against Ballard in motocross in the Australian Supercross Championship.
Yeah.
way
Yeah.
back in the
That's
day.
right. You would have.
The
Yeah.
very first one. Yeah. Ballard's good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And he's still always riding as well. Yeah. So yeah.
And what about Gull? Is Steven still riding?
He still does ride. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah. No, he still rides for fun. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. What about Craig Dack?
Well, Craig Dack, I don't know if he rides, to be honest, but he owns and manages the factory Yamaha team and has done for.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah.
30 years probably. Yeah.
Yeah, that's
basically
right.
he won his last championship, I think, in 92.
Yeah.
And I think 93 he started the team. So he's basically done that the whole time. And then he also came over and ran Yamaha at Troy for a couple of years as well.
Yeah,
and he was sort of doing both.
Yeah.
But
So
he's so our two big long running, or especially his long running, the two big motocross teams in Australia is the Honda team, which is like Yuriv Konsky that also owns the Firepower team that races in the US. So he's factory Honda here, and Craig's factory Yamaha, and they're the two big rigs in the they're sort of the two sort of powerhouse Aussie motocross teams. So yeah.
And I know, and Jeff Leask, and I know what he's doing, and he's a busy guy.
He's the I'm not sure if he's. I think he's actually the importer. He's selling Stark Vargs anyway. Yeah. So it's funny, all those guys, they're still all at the Aussie Nationals, like they're all there. And Glenn Bell is another one you might remember. Glenn Bell works for Penrite Oil.
Oh yeah. Bell,
he's always there. And
of course,
they're all still.
Funny story
involved.
about Jeff Leask. Him and his family came over to California and stayed with my parents in Yucca Valley when he was like I think 15 or 16 years old.
Yeah.
At the time, and I had already been out on the circuit racing, and I was already finishing my US, I think starting my European tour when he came to visit. He stayed with my parents for a while out in Yucca Valley.
Yeah.
And practice on my tracks. It's kind of funny. It's kind of cool.
Yeah.
So it was my parents really enjoyed having his whole family stay with us. Really funny.
Yeah.
Good times.
There's been a pretty good history of Aussie legends, in moto. There's been a few gaps. There was a bit of a gap from Chad. There's a bit of a gap from Chad to the Lawrence boys. We had a bit of a void there, but it
goes that way. Everything's in cycles, but it's amazing how many riders you guys produce, how many great riders you produce, for such a small country compared to the numbers we have in this country.
That's right. I think our population's about the same as the population of Texas.
Yeah, probably. Yeah,
it is.
It's much smaller than California.
It's less than California. It's about the same size as Texas.
Yeah, we have 50 million in California.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Yeah, you can fit 5 Australias in there.
Yeah. So it's amazing.
No, it's amazing how many good guys you guys produce. I think it's because you guys are all into sports, outdoor guys.
Yeah.
You love, and the sports. You like kind of those kind of events.
We do well in sports. We do well in sport in general.
Yeah.
we always seem to punch above our weight in all sorts of
Yeah.
sports. Yeah, it's something that we're Aussies are very proud of. That's for sure. Yeah.
Oh, for sure. And you guys got a lot of places to ride still, I hope. You're not.
Yeah, like we have the same problems as everywhere, but it's obviously
Yeah.
we got space,
Yeah.
The populated areas, the same pressures. We've lost tracks, we've lost really
Yeah.
good tracks to noise and housing, and then also probably worse than that is the environmental push like you guys have had there too, around
Yeah.
land closures and not being able to
Yeah.
access land for recreational vehicles
Yeah.
and all that sort of thing. That's always a struggle here. But yeah, it's pretty good. Depends depends what part of Australia you live. Well, where I live,
Yeah.
I'm not in a highly populated area, so we can just do whatever we want.
You can go out from your backyard.
I can do, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I
That's
can do.
good. That's
Yeah,
awesome.
yeah.
Yeah.
It
At least
is
you can still do that.
it is cool. Yeah,
It's pretty tough here in Europe to do that. Yeah.
yeah. That's right. Yeah,
You have to know where you're going. You have to be really careful, and it's pretty limited to ride off road here. You have to be. They still in France. There's still places you can ride. In Italy, there's some small pockets of places you can still trail ride. Free ride. It's pretty hard. You have to kind of stay on trails, and you just can't boondock it and take off across the bush, as you'd say.
yeah. That's right.
You can't chase any kangaroos.
What sort of music are you into, Danny?
Me? What music? I love. I like all music. I love. I mean, I like got everything. I like 60s, 70s, 80s, but the good more classic rock and and more classic rock, kind of stuff.
Do you have like a favorite concert that you went to back in California about when you were young or anything like that?
Hey, I mean, YouTube I like, but I don't know. I'd say I like the Stones. I like I like shoot, so many different genres of music. I don't know. I don't have anything specific I listen to, but I like a lot of the new music. New artists, like to find new sounds, new things.
Yeah,
Even if they're just one record or one song wonders.
yeah.
But
Yeah.
yeah, but it's amazing. Like some of the bands, like Stones and YouTube, been able to keep producing stuff. It's kind of amazing. But
It is, yeah.
I saw David Bowie in Australia.
Did you?
Yeah,
Really?
cool.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Where-
went to his concert.
Yeah. Was that when you were here for a Supercross?
Yeah.
So like Sydney or Brisbane or something like that.
Yeah, and I like some of the country western stuff in America as well. I can listen to country western music a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. I reckon I've taken up a fair bit of your time. I could talk moto forever, so I've always got to.
I know.
Always got to wrap things up at some
Well, if
stage.
there's anything else on your mind, ask me now. That's cool.
No, that's okay. I reckon. Oh no, sorry. I just noticed on my list. You're one thing that people always I'm always sort of known for is that I smile a lot, and I always known for is that I smile a lot. And I don't reckon I've ever seen a photo of you where you don't have a big smile. So I reckon you're that same sort of person where it's always smiling.
Yeah.
But, what pushes your buttons though? There's got to be something that when does Danny Laporte not smile? What pushes your buttons?
I have to really get fired up. It takes a lot to push my buttons, but then it's game on though. If you get to that point,
I can relate to that. Then, there's another guy that smiles all the time. I can relate to that.
I'm just hiding what's behind it all. But I think I have a good outlook in life. I mean, I'm a happy person. I love everything and love people, And so I just look for the good in everybody and I try to make people happy as well, so a lot of it's kind of funny. I'll be walking down the street and see someone and try to get them just to talk, because they're so in their own world. So I'm actually that way. I'm very open. Like, there's nothing drives me crazier to be in an airport now and seeing everybody on their cell phones, or somewhere in public. They won't even communicate anymore, and that's what I enjoy doing, to pick people's brains and listen, and so I like history and things. So I got a different perspective, I guess, in life. So that way it's a positive thing, and I just I don't know. I like to see what's behind other people's brains.
Everybody has a story.
Yeah, exactly,
Everybody has
exactly.
a story. It's just if you're prepared to listen to it. Yeah.
Yeah, and so I always try to make them smile and make things humorous, a little bit. But I don't know. Yeah, it's kind of weird now. It's true. Everywhere you go today, it's kind of everybody is so stuck on our phones. It's too much, or in the social media world. Um, I don't know. Before we would the only thing we had was that we had a voice recorder. Or someone would call in, right? Leave on your voice machine, and you
Yeah.
have to call people back at night once,
Yeah.
or
You
whatever.
check
Now it's like
check
if
the
you don't
recording.
respond in 3 seconds, it's a problem. No, I think
Yeah.
people are not they're not going outside and creating things with their hands and their physical things. Is like they're getting stuck on their computer. I
Yeah.
don't know I don't know where the next innovators are going to come from that create with their manufacturing or building something. I mean, what it's all going to be made in China now. It's now we're just going to be servants of
Yeah.
Amazon away. Amazon culture. We just push a button and order it. We don't care how it's made or where it's made. Just so it's kind of a strange time, but yeah, it's really, really that kind of interesting dynamic. What's going to happen next, with the people growing up with that, I have to blame myself. Even my kids, my son doesn't know how to turn a wrench. It's kind of like funny to see, doesn't even want to work on something and to fix something with a screwdriver.
Yeah. I tell
But
my
it's
kids,
my fault.
it's like I can fix anything, whether anything to do with a house, a car, anything at all. I can fix everything. And I tell my kids, this I'm a good resource. It's better you better start learning if you want to learn how to do anything. All you got to do is just help out, watch me, ask questions. But I said, when you move out, you'll be paying someone else to do it. Don't be ringing me.
Yeah, when it starts hurting your pocketbook,
and
you're gonna.
you know what my daughter says? She says, "I'll just ring mum and she'll tell you to do it."
Oh, that's
she's
a good
bloody
one.
right too. She's right
That's so
too.
true.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah,
No. Anyway, no. I enjoy life. I like to travel and talk with people and of all everywhere in the world, and pick their brain.
yeah. Very,
Yeah.
very good, Danny. There's two things I do to close out the show.
Yeah.
The first one is all the any guests I have on that aren't Aussies. I get you to give me your best Australian accent.
That's a pretty good one, mate. Let me see. What was I used to do one? It was pretty funny, but I can't remember who. You're putting me on the spot. I'm not a good entertainer that way. Oh gosh, you got me stumped.
What about just give us a g'day, mate?
G'day, mate. G'day, mate. I guess that would be
Yeah,
my best.
you're not too bad. That wasn't too bad. Yeah,
Yeah, it wasn't too bad.
that was passable.
Yeah, I almost moved actually to Australia. I bought a place in Australia one time back in 82, 83,
Yeah,
near
whereabouts?
up in Brisbane area.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, pretty funny.
It's good
I
spot
might,
up there.
I might have might have had a place down there if I'm that. A couple Americans have moved down there actually, huh? They're racers. Jimmy Ellis was one, right?
Yep. Jimmy,
Yeah.
I don't know where Jimmy is nowadays, but he came down. He had a second career basically. Like he had a great career here, and Marty Moats was another one.
Moats, yeah,
Yeah.
Marty,
Marty Moats.
Staten. Didn't Staten? Oh no, Staten was South Africa.
Rex did some one-off races here, but now
Yeah.
Marty, and then also Eddie Warren. Eddie
Oh
Warren
yeah.
had a great career
Oh,
here.
Tosh. No. He's what's his name? He's a Japanese kid. He lives in Australia. I raced with him at Saddleback in Indian Dunes.
Who races here nowadays?
Yeah, he had a Japanese heritage. And he lives down there.
How
Anyway.
old? Like a young guy that's down here now.
He's my age now. He's 66,
Oh, okay.
67.
Okay, no, I'm not sure
Yeah.
who that is. Yeah, but Eddie Warren. Yeah, he came here and he had a great career here, and then he also went to Japan for a while, and then but he came back here. He still lives here, Eddie. So
yeah, and then also what's his name? He was working at KTM not too long ago. He moved down there. He was a test rider for KTM, I think, for a while. Young guy, younger. He's probably in his 40s now.
Yeah, I can't think who that might be. But that's all right. It'll come to me at some stage. I'm sure I'll figure out who it is. Yeah. Cool.
I'm rubbing off on you. I'm making you lose your memory.
no, that's all right. It's funny. My memory for some things is just amazing, and then other things it's terrible. Yeah, I think it just depends.
Yeah.
My memory for old motocross stuff is amazing. Like I remember stuff. Super well there and that sort of thing. But then I won't remember what I'm supposed to do tomorrow unless I've written it down a note. So it's it just depends. Funny like that. Cool, Danny. And then the last thing I do for the show is my outro song is a bit of Kenny Rogers. I just sing a bit of Kenny Rogers for the outro, and I always say there's a funny backstory that I won't bore you with, but I always say if you know the words to The Gambler, then you're welcome to join in and for a sing along.
Okay.
But there's no expectations.
Okay, well, it depends if I know the lyrics or not.
Depends if you know the words. Yeah, no worries. So I'll just slide into a bit of that. So I handed him my bottle, and he drank down my last swallow. Then he bummed a cigarette and asked me for a light. And the night got deathly quiet, and his face lost all expression. Said, if you're going to play the game, boy, you got to learn to play it right. You got to know when to hold 'em, know when to fold 'em, know when to walk away, know when to run. You never count your money. When you're sitting at the table, there'll be time enough for counting when the dealing's done. Danny Laporte, it's been an absolute pleasure talking to you. It's been great fun, man. Yeah, and enjoy your rest of your time in Oslo, and safe travels back to the US. And I certainly hope to meet you in person at some stage when I get to visit the US next time. So,
well, if you get over to do the Enduro this year, come on, I'll meet you there.
Yeah, I won't make it to that one, but yeah, it'd be great to meet you over in the States here at some stage. Thank you very much, man.
Hey, Steve, thanks a lot. It was really great. Thanks.
No worries. Thank you. Cheers.
All right. Bye-bye.